Tensions are flaring in the Caribbean as a Russian warship makes a bold move near Venezuela, prompting an immediate and powerful response from the United States Navy. What just happened in these strategic waters? And why has the US reaction left Moscow completely stunned? Let's dive into the details of this high-stakes naval encounter. In recent days, the Russian frigate Admiral Gorshkov, one of Russia's most advanced warships, was spotted sailing unusually close to Venezuelan shores. This wasn't just a routine patrol. The Gorshkov is a formidable vessel armed with Zircon hypersonic missiles, making its presence in America's backyard a clear strategic message from the Kremlin. Russia and Venezuela have been strengthening their ties, with Moscow seeing Caracas as a key ally in the Western Hemisphere. By sending a state-of-the-art warship, Russia is projecting power, signaling its support for the Venezuelan government, and challenging American influence right on its doorstep. For years, the Caribbean has been considered a sphere of influence for the United States. So this move by Russia is a direct poke, a test of Washington's resolve. The Kremlin likely expected a standard, measured diplomatic response. They were wrong. The Pentagon's reaction was swift, decisive, and frankly, breathtaking. Instead of just sending a single destroyer to shadow the Russian frigate, the US Navy initiated a massive show of force. The USS George Washington Carrier Strike Group, which was on a pre-planned deployment in the region, was immediately rerouted. This isn't just one ship. A carrier strike group is a floating fortress. It includes the aircraft carrier itself, with its air wing of over 60 aircraft, multiple guided missile destroyers, cruisers, and a submarine. We're talking about overwhelming naval and air power converging on a single point in the Caribbean. But that wasn't all. The U.S. Southern Command also deployed P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft from bases in Florida. These planes are the world's most advanced sub-hunters and surveillance platforms. They began flying continuous sorties, blanketing the area with advanced radar and sensors, tracking not only the Admiral Gorshkov, but any potential Russian submarines that might be lurking beneath the waves. The message from the US was unmistakable. We see you, we are here, and we have you completely surrounded. This level of response was far beyond what Moscow anticipated. They sent one advanced ship to make a statement, and the US responded with an entire fleet, essentially turning the tables and putting the Russian vessel in a very vulnerable position. So why did the US react with such overwhelming force? There are several layers to this. First, it's about deterrence. The US is drawing a clear red line by demonstrating its capability to rapidly deploy massive firepower. The Pentagon is sending a message not just to Russia, but to other adversaries like China, that any challenge to its strategic interests in the Western Hemisphere will be met with a disproportionate and overwhelming response. It's a classic power play designed to prevent future provocations. The US is saying, don't even think about it. Second, it's about reassurance to regional allies. Countries in Latin America and the Caribbean are watching this situation closely. By taking such a firm stance, Washington is showing its partners that it remains committed to regional security and stability. It reinforces the idea that the US is the primary security guarantor in the Americas, a role that has been central to its foreign policy for over a century under the Monroe Doctrine. This robust action tells countries like Colombia, Brazil, and others that the US will stand firm against external interference in the region. The reaction from Moscow has been one of public silence and, according to intelligence sources, private shock. Russian state media, which initially trumpeted the Gorshkov's voyage as a triumph of Russian naval power, has suddenly gone quiet on the topic. Diplomatically, there have been no boastful statements, no threats. This silence speaks volumes. The Kremlin was caught off guard. They expected a diplomatic protest or a single ship shadowing theirs, which they could spin as a tense but manageable standoff. Instead, they found their high-tech frigate being monitored from the air, from the surface, and from below the sea by a vastly superior force, the Admiral Gorshkov, intended as a symbol of Russian strength, was effectively neutralized and put on the defensive. This incident also highlights a critical difference in naval capabilities. While Russia can build and deploy individual, highly advanced warships like the Gorshkov, it lacks the global logistics and support network to sustain large-scale, long-range naval operations in the same way the United States can. The U.S. Navy's ability to project power with multiple carrier strike groups across the globe simultaneously is unmatched. This encounter was a stark reminder of that reality. The U.S. didn't even have to break a sweat. It rerouted a carrier group that was already in the theater. For Russia to mount a similar response would be a monumental, if not impossible, undertaking. Let's look at the broader context. This isn't happening in a vacuum. It comes at a time of heightened global tensions, particularly with the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Russia is looking for ways to put pressure on the US and its allies elsewhere in the world. Deploying assets to Venezuela, Cuba, or other allied nations in Latin America is a way for Russia to create a second front of sorts, a strategic distraction to pull US attention and resources away from Europe. They are trying to replicate the kind of pressure that NATO is putting on Russia's western borders. However, as this event shows, the US has more than enough capacity to manage threats in its own hemisphere, while continuing to support its allies in Europe. What does this mean for Venezuela? For President Maduro's government, this is a mixed bag. On one hand, the presence of a Russian warship is a welcome symbol of support from a powerful ally. On the other hand, the overwhelming US response turns Venezuela into a potential flashpoint. The last thing Caracas wants is to be the epicenter of a direct military confrontation between two nuclear powers. The incident likely makes the Venezuelan leadership nervous, as it demonstrates just how quickly their country can become a geopolitical chessboard for much larger players. So what happens next? The Admiral Gorshkov will likely continue its planned port visit in Venezuela, but under the watchful eyes of the US Navy. The carrier strike group and P-8 aircraft will almost certainly remain in the area, maintaining a constant surveillance perimeter until the Russian frigate leaves the region. The message has been sent and received. The US has demonstrated that while it is focused on Europe and the Indo-Pacific, it has not for 1 second taken its eye off its own neighborhood. This whole episode is a masterclass in modern naval power dynamics. It's a silent, tense dance of warships and aircraft where movements and deployments say more than any public statement could. The US chose not to engage in a war of words, but instead in a show of force, a language that every military in the world understands perfectly. Moscow tested the waters, and Washington responded by showing them the full depth of its power. The result? A silent and stunned Kremlin, and a powerful reminder to the world of who still rules the waves in the Western Hemisphere. The Russian frigate got close, but the US Navy's reaction ensured it wouldn't get any ideas. This is a developing story, and we'll be keeping a close watch on any new movements in the Caribbean. The strategic game of cat and mouse continues. Thanks for watching. If you found this breakdown interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe for more in-depth analysis of global events. See you in the next one.